look at traditional media and then think about all the things that it's left out, the two-way street of conversation and the look behind the glass and that sort of thing. And that's what you want to show on social media.
Welcome to the Motorsports and Driver Development Show. My name is Katie.
And I'm Keto.
And today we are joined with Luke Munnell, who is an automotive and motorsports photographer. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. So an automotive and motorsports photographer, you just run around and take pictures of cars?
Basically, yeah.
That's cool. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of my background, which I think you already know, but a lot of people don't. So I moved out to California, where I live now, in 2007, and I was an editor at Motor Trend Group on Import Tuner magazine, of all things. So we were doing all the custom import cars and a lot of like street cars and show cars, and not a lot of real motorsports. But, we were everywhere at the same time. So we got to go to drag racing. We got to do, press leads at IMSA and World Challenge and all these fun things. And, I did that for 4 years, 4.5 years. And then I got into the advertising side as a social media manager for Mazda down here. And when I started working with Mazda more closely is when I really, I think, started to develop the appreciation for motorsports, and started finding ways of how to get into the industry. 3 years of that, and I just was itching to get out there. I was behind a desk too much. I wanted to be in the field. I was writing more than I was shooting, which is great because I like to do that too. But I just was really itching to just get out there and feel the sun and the heat and the wind and the dirt and the tire smoke and the rocks. And that's it. So I packed up and I left, and I just decided to do freelance photography full-time in automotive and motorsports. And I've never really looked back since then.
So how do you get your gigs?
It's a combination of having to pitch things, so a lot of times there'll be, not so much these days, but back in the good old days when we had events and racing seasons, I would just make a calendar and I would pitch it to different clients, usually editorial, at least to start. And then I would find race teams and organizations that I think would be interested in photography, other ad agencies, things like that. And I would just send out cold calls at first, emails, and just really try to, sell the product of photography for social media or for digital marketing or whatever the case is, editorial coverage. And then, from there, you meet people, you develop clients, they'll contact you for things. And then it's just a good back and forth of those two, I think, ways.
So are you pitching both writing and photography now, or do you mostly just stick with photography?
I pitch both, and, for the editorial guys, they love it. They get a good combination. They don't have to make a second call. They get everything buttoned up and it's easy, real turnkey. For the agency people, they don't really take that because they have copywriters that specialize in copywriting, and then they have photographers that just deal with that. And I think they like that arrangement a little better, which is great for me too, because I like writing, I enjoy it, I'm good at it, but it does take more time, I think, than photography. So I don't know, I'm a little impatient. The sooner I can get out there onto the next shoot, the happier I am, really.
So you mentioned cold calls a little earlier. A lot of people don't understand, how that all works and how many no's you get versus yes, and how you have to stick with it. But can you talk a little bit about that? Yeah,
that's the most daunting part of it. And I think that's why a lot of people don't get into business for themselves, is because there's an easy 30 to 70% divide between the no's and the yeses, the yeses and the no's. So if you're making 10 pitches, you should expect 7 of them to not go anywhere. And then 3 of them will, and you'll be fine. That might be, 3 that you can just barely handle 3, I think if everybody got everything they pitched, they'd be busier than they think they would,
Right.
But it's rough, but if you're prepared for it and you understand that it's just business, it's not personal, then it's easy.
Yeah, so we've already covered a handful of things. There's a sales element, there's a writing element, and then photography. I assume as you're prepping for either an event or a shoot, and then after, you probably do a million other things. If you had to summarize sort of your job, what are all the different pieces of the job that you do?
Well, I think it starts with just the planning. There's a lot of planning, to make some. I'm going to get a little cream for my coffee here. To make the shoots really go well, there's a ton of pre-planning, and that's one of my favorite parts of it. So you think about the scheduling, you think about when different things within the event are going to happen, where you need to be. You look at the time of day, and you look at track maps, for example, and decide where you want to shoot. All those things. I mean, even down to booking travel and that sort of thing. It's really a lot of fun, but that's a lot of work too. That's where it starts, I think. And then after that, you start pitching the clients and finding the business once you know that you can give them something. And then I guess I'm kind of drawing a blank. What was the rest of the question? Just what was the rest of the process?
Yeah, more just like all the things that somebody, if you're a photographer, everybody's gonna say all you do is take pictures. Talk about a few things. What are the other things you have to do?
Those are the big ones. And then, just being able to deliver on your product was one thing. I mean, if you're going to do it part-time, make sure you have the time to do it. If you're going to do it full-time, make sure you can dedicate yourself to being full-time. Because a lot of times clients will say they want something, and then after the event, they'll decide something different fits their plans a little better. And, they're going to want you to deliver on that. So that's another big part of it, I think, too. And then, after the fact, there's editing and there's writing if there's writing involved. And then there's just a lot of, promotion after the fact, just social media, showing your work off, LinkedIn, Instagram, things like that. Mm-hmm. And then basically the cycle just repeats itself. So I would say the breakdown to shooting versus desk work versus actual shooting is also probably 30 or 70 to 30. Yeah. I think I spend most of my time at my desk, gearing up for these things or dealing with them afterward. And then just a small amount of time actually in the field shooting.
Yeah. Mm.
So you say you have to deliver. What's the craziest thing you've had to do to get a shot?
It's tricky. It's, there's not a lot that you can do in terms of motorsports. There's a lot of places where you can shoot and where you can't shoot, and you got to be cognizant of that and respectful of it, or else you just won't be invited back, But there's a lot of times when you do get to do fun, creative stuff like the cold track time and in between sessions. And that's where you get all the fun car to car shots, and you get to hang out of somebody's trunk while you're blasting down the racetrack, and get shots of cars like that. So I think that's probably it, Some of the events are a little looser. So like an IMSA event, for example, you don't go anywhere you're not supposed to. But for a lot of the enthusiast events, we'll say you can get a little closer. And if you're out at a stage rally, you can get right on the track if you're dumb enough to do that, Right. So that makes it fun. But I mean, there are some incredible shots right in the danger zone. So it's, you're always kind of gauging whether or not it's a good idea. You're going to get an awesome shot if you do it, but it might be very bad if things go wrong.
Right. But like when you shoot cars from magazines, you ever have to sneak on somewhere to get that shot?
Absolutely.
Drive down a boardwalk to shoot the car and get out of there before the cops show up.
Yeah. And that's something that a lot of people don't know. There's a big difference when it comes to working for editorial clients versus commercial clients. Mm-hmm. So editorial guys, you can basically do anything. As long as you survive it, you'll be fine. But the commercial guys, they have to think about location, usage rights, and permits and things like that. So you can't go shoot in front of the Hollywood sign, for example, because if anybody's making money off that photo, and for like a branded commercial purpose, they'll be sent an invoice by this commission of people who own the rights to the Hollywood sign, for example. But editorial, you can arguably say that one photo didn't make us any money, and nobody's really going to take you to court over that and refute it. But, for a lot of brands, they have to be very aware of their surroundings and backgrounds and usage and that sort of thing.
Interesting.
That is really interesting. Something people probably don't think about. And maybe for people who don't know, will you clarify what editorial means versus commercial?
Yeah, editorial is just magazine shooting for the most part. So, and that's websites these days too. It's not just magazines, but it's just event coverage, things along those lines. Commercial is, Toyota's effort in IMSA, for example. That would be an example of a commercial thing, or just an actual, just specifically just getting certain shots that are used for print ads, OLAs, things like that.
Yeah. And so when you're at a track or you're at an event, you shoot with a spotter. I think usually I've seen you do it. Tell me a little bit about that dynamic and what they're there to do for you. Yeah.
So that's interesting. It's fun. The event that we shot at Glen Helen was a good event because there's a lot of room, and the drivers are all really good and they stay away from you. They're never in real serious danger, I feel like, to getting hit by a car. So I don't know how necessary a spotter really is at that point. But if you go on these stage rallies and you're in these places where things do get a little hairy and the cars are faster and there are a lot more blind corners, I think a spotter is a great idea. It's it's pretty much essential, especially for the stage rallies. So, I mean, that's honestly, I don't work with a spotter often because I do a lot of sports car racing and there's just no need. But if you're doing hill climb or stage rally, I think it's a great idea. That spotter can keep you alive, and they'll also tell you when the cars are coming, around those blind corners, and you can prepare for that.
Are they just like, oh shit, you better watch out? Do you have like a code language?
Well, I'll tell you what, a good spotter is probably akin to a good co-driver. Well, they'll just pull you out of the way if you're not in a good spot. I mean, I've never been in that position yet, but I mean, that's technically the job, is to just be your eyes and, make the decisions for you while you're behind the camera.
Yeah. Okay. This is we're circling back a little, and it's sort of a personal question, not personal interest that I want to dig into, which is, you said you create some content for LinkedIn. And I think that sort of as people who dabble between professional and creative spaces, LinkedIn becomes a little bit funny because you are either constantly promoting yourself or you're creating content that maybe doesn't feel right for the platform. I'd love to hear the kinds of things you post to LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of a struggle. When I was at the Mazda agency, and even before that at Import Tuner, I did a lot of social media, and those are the early days of it. So LinkedIn wasn't around when I was at Import Tuner, and maybe the last year or 2 years at the Mazda agency, they had been around. But it's always fun when you have just a few things to say or do or show, and you have to find novel ways to do it for each one of these platforms. It becomes a bit of a challenge, So LinkedIn was always supposed to be the more buttoned up, professional, concise place. And you could also, I think, on LinkedIn talk a lot more about the business behind things, and versus, what you would want to do in Instagram or Facebook or something like that. So there's definitely a difference there. Personally, I like the idea of LinkedIn. I like the vision of it a lot better, but I don't think the practice has really followed as faithfully. I look at LinkedIn these days and I feel like it's more and more like Facebook, and it's kind of unfortunate because, I mean, Facebook is fun, but there is just a lot of noise and not a lot of signal. And LinkedIn used to be better signal to noise, and now it's kind of not that way. There's a lot of self-promotion that's sort of shameless. There's a lot of shady self-promotion, we'll say, and the reputability of it is kind of falling. It doesn't mean everybody does that. I think most people still approach it with good intentions. Mm-hmm. It's just, if anything, I guess you've got to be more aware of it,
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So let's kind of rewind a little. You've been at this for a little while. I'm curious, what are some of the things you've learned and some of the things you wish you had known prior to, how about specifically going into business for yourself?
Yeah. I'll tell you what, it's funny. All these things that I was told when I was younger, as a student or an employee, about note keeping and scheduling and calendars and the importance of all these things, I kind of just was too stubborn to embrace any of it before, because I thought, I don't need that. I don't need to write that down. I'll remember it. I have a steel trap memory, And then once I started working for myself, I realized I don't, I need all those things. So having a to-do list and having a calendar and being prompt with emails and calls and things like that, they're very important. I didn't realize that. I wish I would have known that sooner. I wish I would have developed a better studying ethic, I think, when I was younger. I think that I would have been a little more prepared for things when I was younger. I think that would have helped a lot. I'm glad I figured it out now. It's better to do that late than never, I suppose. Mm-hmm. But that's first and foremost the one thing I wish I had a little bit more acumen with when I got into business for myself, was just the importance of all that, just pre-planning and structure.
Yeah.
So now that you have that under your belt, what are some plans for the future?
Well, it's funny. I right before the virus hit, I was in the middle of this big motorsports marketing pitch, and it was all cold calling and mailers and things like that. And I was going to send that out to a bunch of race teams and agencies, and I did get through the first part of it. I did get these brochures printed and everything sent out. And then literally as they were hitting people's doorsteps, the news was breaking that, we need to stay inside. This is kind of a big thing. Everybody's got to be careful. And, all the plans have to change. So I don't think there wasn't much of a response to that. And I didn't follow up with it because I just didn't feel like it was a good time to do that. It wasn't appropriate. So I'm going to get back into that, I think, in the next few weeks, if it seems like things are going in a direction of opening up and getting back to normal. So that's the first and foremost thing. I want to reach out to these businesses, explain to them, the importance of using good imagery, tying to that to their brand, and all the places where you can maximize your exposure with quality photography. That's the goal, and then hopefully I'll hear back from a lot of those people, and we'll have better conversations about how to tailor content creation to their brand and help them actually see value in it and not just be something that they feel like they need to do. So that's the one part of it that I think is top of my list right now. But then, in the meantime, this downtime has been great because it's given a lot of us a chance to just buff up our portfolios and get things more organized on the back end. And I've been trying to take advantage of that as good as I can. And I think I've made some decent progress. So I'm looking forward to showing some of that stuff off and just trying to find more work where I can. Motorsports is going to slow down a little bit professionally. I think the enthusiast side is still going to be there. I think the enthusiasts are ready to go, and I think if you tell an enthusiast driver that they have to social distance and they have to do these things so that they can have an event, they'll do it, So I'm looking forward to seeing how that pans out.
Yeah.
So this marketing thing that you had going, was this strictly pictures, or you're actually going to do some of the marketing for these companies on social media, or what all the different?
Yeah, good question. It was actually a little bit of both. So, predominantly just photography, just supplying them with photography for whatever their needs are and tailoring what I can provide them to those needs is the first part. But since I do have a good background in social media, and especially all the editorial clients I have, I'm going to try to approach this as a sort of a hybrid system, where I'll say, whenever I meet these people that want to do business and I get these relationships established, I'll be able to offer them a little extra, so not just the photos, but some coverage in these publications and so on and so forth. And I thought a lot about it, and I think it's really a good way to help pretty much everybody, because the editorial guys are always looking for ideas. These guys, the race teams, are always doing cool stuff. So if I can help bridge that gap a little bit, I'm all for that.
That's awesome. You're talking about some things that I try and encourage people who race with us to think about. And then coupled with, we also talked about something before we even kicked all this recording off. The idea of keeping up the content, using imagery, making it more intentional. But then also we talked about showing people the real you before we started talking, and being a little more genuine and worrying less about being polished. I would love for you to talk a little bit about how you think about either your own social media or the social media of someone who's more of just like a normal human, not a big brand, and how you would tackle even coming up with a plan for it.
It's really tough. That's actually something I struggle with personally still. I mean, even it's easy to do it for a brand, I feel like, because the brand identity is established and, the goals are there, and you can very precisely identify the target market for each post, especially if you're going to get into promoted posts. You'll have different audiences for different posts. So it's very regimented and easy, and there's really empirical data there to work off of. But when it's personal, it's tough, because you want your personality to come through, and you want your interests to come through, and you want a level of your own sense of humor to come through. And sometimes that's hard to do on social media. Sarcasm doesn't usually translate unless people know you. So your friends will get these sarcastic or satirical posts or jokes that you make. And then a lot of people who haven't met you won't get it, and there's a tendency, I think, on social media to kind of assume the worst in people, which is not good, but it's just, I think, human nature. I haven't fully dissected it and understood it yet, but I think you don't have to, you just have to be cognizant of it, So it's tough. I think anybody that wants to have a good professional image on social media has to be a little less personal. They've got to pull back a little bit, unless they're really clever. And I see some people pull it off, and I'm really envious, and I really appreciate it, But most people try to pull it off, and it just doesn't quite translate. So that's one thing that's tough about personal social media. Aside from that, I think you can't go wrong with showing your work. If you do good work, just put it out there, and that's it. People will see that, and that'll be the redeeming quality in their eyes, I think, is just knowing that you're legitimate, you're good, and that you try and that you care and things like that.
Yes, I just can't hear that or say that enough. I feel like, especially with people in motorsports, because there's a clear winner. Someone will get the fastest time. Someone will cross the finish line first, and it makes it really easy to feel like, I might not be good enough or interesting enough to share my story. When in actuality, what you said right there at the end, which is that you care and you try, that is so amazing that you're willing to say, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to do this thing that most people don't do, and I'm going to show the world, That's amazing.
Yeah. The ways to look at social media, I think, is just to look at traditional media and then think about all the things that it's left out. You know, the two-way street of conversation and the look behind the glass and that sort of thing. And that's what you want to show on social media. So, I mean, if you're out there and you're winning and you're at the top of your game, I mean, you should always put that information out there. Be proud of your achievements. But if you're not there yet, just show people what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, people love that stuff. That's why they turn to social media to look at content when they do. It's because they want to see that more personal stuff, you know? So, I mean, don't be afraid to show that. I do, just as an aside, I do a lot with drifting too. And drifting is a really fun and dynamic community because you have everything subjective, first of all, but you do have winners of every event and you do have people at the top of their game, but they're really no more popular in the mainstream than the guys who are just making it really fun, you know? And those guys have huge social media followings. They've got diehard fans. They get their faces tattooed on them and all these crazy things. And it's all because they're just showing who they are and they're just doing fun stuff and they're enjoying life. And I think people are drawn to that, if not as much, probably more than just whoever's winning. Yeah.
Totally.
Right.
So getting your face tattooed on someone else's body is the goal we're now striving for.
Yeah.
World, here it is.
Yeah. Keto tattoos 2021.
I love it. I love it so much. Tell us about maybe the coolest project or the coolest thing you've ever worked on that you just, if you could tell everyone a million times about it.
Yeah, man, I don't know. There have been so many cool projects. You know, it's funny. I was just thinking that the other day. I just having a nostalgic moment thinking about all the fun stuff I've gotten to do or see over the last few years. And there've been a ton. I think when I was at the Mazda agency, they were just changing a lot of stuff internally and with their motorsports program. So they had this class called the GX class, and it was this sports car racing project. It was sort of a GT car build, but it was all alternative fueled. And at the time they were doing turbo diesel, and there were a couple electric teams. I don't think they were really up and running yet, but it was a class that was intended to be just for alternative fuel vehicles. And watching these guys bring that program to life from literally just a couple of sketches on a sheet of paper was really cool. And it was something I got to see in the span of like 18 months. It was a really fast project. You know, it seemed rushed, but it wasn't. These guys paid really strict attention to detail. And when the whole thing actually did debut, they started winning like back to back to back. Wow. It was a successful program. That was like start to finish, just seeing a cool idea come to life into a successful racing program was really humbling and really awe-inspiring. You know, you meet the people behind that build and you realize these are people that know what they're doing. You know, like they take chances, yeah, but they have so much data to back it up. They do so much testing. You know, it was really cool to see that happen.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So in all your time shooting all these cars, there ever been one particular car that you just long for?
That's a good question too, man. That's really tough to say. I think it all depends who's driving it. You know, you could see a cool car and then you could see the way someone drives it and think, I want to be in the passenger seat of that car. You know, that's a ride along I want to go on. But if I had to pick one.
In the driver's seat?
Or the driver's seat, but I don't know if I trust myself in a lot of those cars, I'll be honest. It's funny. It's like you guys are probably familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect and that inverse bell curve that you see.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that in motorsports. You know, when I first got into it, I remember thinking like, I want to drive all these cars and I want to race and do all these things. And then when you get a little taste of it, you realize it's a lot harder than people think it is, you know? Mm-hmm. So then the tendency is to, you know, be like, no, I don't really want to drive your car. I'll break it, you know?
I have that feeling. It took Keto probably half of a drive back from the Midwest to convince me to race this car in rallycross. And I only accepted because I was like, man, we've been at this a long time. Like he's going to keep going. Like we still have we got a lot of ground to cover before we get home. But to that point, what's really interesting, the thing I didn't think about before I raced was, I don't know if everybody else is like this, but when I get on a roller coaster, I'm a little nervous. I get on it. It's like this big rush. I get off and literally all I want to do is sprint back around to the front and get right back on.
Yeah.
That is how racing is. You finish, you're like, no, I want to keep going.
Yeah. I'll never, ever, 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 ever forget. There's these moments in life that sometimes they have a reason. Sometimes it seems like there's no reason, but they just get burned in your memory. And I'll never forget my first time down a drag strip. And that was the exact feeling I felt. You know, you do a burnout and you stage and you're nervous and then you do it. And I mean, let's be honest, I was driving a Honda Civic, probably went through the traps at 95 miles an hour. But I was like, this is the most amazing thing ever. I can't wait to go back and stage again. You know, it's just pure bliss, you know. And every time, I think every first time you do something fun in a car, it just has a tendency to stick there, you know.
Yeah, like an addiction.
That is
it is. And you know, it's cool to get involved in motorsports and racing by seeing it online and playing video games and things like that. I think that's important. I think those things help, but you have to get behind the wheel of a car, you know, and once you do, you realize, like, I get it. You know, I understand why this is such a big thing for a lot of people.
Totally.
Yes.
I do have some questions around the circumstances in which landed you in a Honda Civic going down a drag strip.
Yeah. Well, I told you, like, the way I got into cars in general was just the import craze. I think I got in like late 90s, and everybody was just making Honda Civics go fast, or Eagle Talons go fast, you know, and that's where I came from. We weren't really like geared towards any particular motorsport. We just wanted to have that car that nobody thought was fast, that could just whoop up on whatever was fast, you know, and that was our motivation. So my first car was a Honda Civic 95 coupe. I put a LS engine in it, not the GM LS, but like the Integra LS engine and nitrous. And that thing was fun. And that engine probably lasted for 8 or 9 months before the piston rings started to fry because the nitrous system was not good, you know, but that's where it started. And I had a couple of 240s from there. I had a Miata. And then every one of those cars, I feel like I learned something new about just building cars and dynamics and how fun they could be and how different they were and that sort of thing. But that's where it started, you know, just wanting to go fast in that Honda Civic.
Have you done anything other than drag racing? Have you done, you know, like road race, and have you done hill climbs, rally cross, anything else?
I've never done hill climbs or rally cross myself. I think I do want to start doing rally cross. I think it's one of the cool things about it. It's like going to a test and tune night at the drag strip where, I mean, it's a lot more complex, but it's approachable like that. You know, you can go in so many different cars, even a rental I've seen these guys do, and you could just have fun. You know, you can learn it, figure it out, you know, especially at places like Glen Helen, you've got a really safe environment to do it, which I think is important, you know. I mean, I can't even think about doing a hill climb, and that would be great, but that's so much farther down the road of learning what I would be doing, you know. At that point, I would like to do it, but a lot of sports car racing, a lot of track days, you know, that always came with the territory, so that was fun. Even back home, I'm from Pittsburgh originally, so we had Beaver Valley Raceway, I think it was back then. It was a fun little course, you know, Summit Point, West Virginia, not too far. We would jet down there occasionally. And then now here in LA, we have Willow Springs, which is down the street, and Chuckwalla and all these places that are, I mean, you could just pop in most days in most organizations for less than $100 and have a good day or 2 days of the track. It's really fun.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Just so you know, there is a hill climb group that operates, I believe, in NorCal.
Nice.
They have a very low barrier to entry. They actually run their safety program much like Solo. So it's kind of up to you how much safety you want in your car.
Yeah.
You only want a little more than they require, but barrier to entry.
What is that group?
They're the what are they called? The North America Hill Climb Association. I can get it for you. I don't remember off the top of my head. They operate here in the Northwest. Pretty sure they go everywhere from Mary Hill, which is southern Washington, down through Oregon. I think they do a race in Idaho also, and then up in NorCal also.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a couple races up there. So yeah, I'm
cool.
a enabler.
Yeah.
I get
it. I like that.
He's like, oh, I heard maybe you're interested in this kind of racing. I'm now going to bombard you with it.
That's awesome.
By the way, there's a stage rally in Nevada this year also. That's still, they moved it to the end of the year, November, I think. So it should, hopefully still be on, but be in your backyard. So
yeah, we have a California Rally Series out here, which does some stage rallies. There's one in Gorman Ridge, which is kind of on the way to NorCal, and then there's, I think, maybe not Nevada, but they have the Prescott Rally, and they have a few other ones, and they're really, really fun, man. They're really a great time. And most people have never heard of these things outside of the community that races in them. So a couple years ago, I pitched coverage of the Gorman Ridge Rally to my editorial clients, and one of them bit, and then the second year they were like, let's do that. That looks great. So it's fun. It's like this untapped market to a lot of people, It
is. Yeah. We were actually talking about this before we got on with you, that if everybody in the U.S. knew about rally, it would be the most like epic race series ever,
Yeah.
I mean,
it's crazy.
And that's all it takes is marketing. Most people don't know. We tell people we run a rally program, and they're like, "Rally, really? So, like, what do you protest?"
Yeah, rally.
Yeah, what?
It's funny. You look at Europe and even Southeast Asia now, and the popularity of rally is just, it's always been big in Europe, but it's skyrocketing in Asia, and just everywhere they take hill climb events, people love it. It's like, I see the steam behind hill climb as kind of like something that was behind X Games a few years ago, where there's like this growing community of diehards, and the coverage, the televised coverage, or just the web coverage is getting insane numbers. Like, people love to see that stuff, So I feel like it's happening. It's just there's so much room to grow,
Yeah.
We do a hill climb down in Mexico called San Pedro Martir. And it's the longest hill climb in the world. It's 20 miles. If you ever get a chance, come check that out.
I would love to see that. That'd be great.
I don't recommend it as your first hill climb, only just because the roads are intense.
It's Mexico. It is pretty intense. They have like a boulder will, not while you're racing, but have come down the mountain, and they just kind of cone it off. So you come around a corner and there's like a boulder kind of jutting out in the middle.
Right.
And you're like, well, that's interesting. But
that wasn't there on the pre-run day.
But it's a great race. It's a great bunch of people who do it, and it's in a magnificent setting. Yeah. Really amazing.
That's thing
awesome.
Sometimes is they're usually in pretty cool settings.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. The imagery is amazing. I would love to do more of it. I got to get into the business of doing it a little bit better. I don't know a whole lot of people that are into rally these days. And after the fall of GRC and I guess it was America's Rallycross after that, it's kind of fallen off the mainstream radar. So a lot of these smaller events happen, and they're really cool, and people I think would love to see them, but it's just hard to find them for somebody that's a little bit removed.
Yeah, I think there's a need for a good media effort around it. It's something we talk about all the time, obviously, but the ARX and the GRCs were really designed for TV. The kind of rally you is not. And so but I want you to know, we saw competitive cornhole on ESPN a couple of days ago. So there's a market here. And it just takes somebody who's a really good creative vision to figure out, how do you take this sport where people are sort of racing in a singular fashion and bring it all together and make it really interesting. So
I think not to cut you off, but it's interesting because I think that the televised aspect of what you can do these days, now that the tech is improving and wireless transmitter range is long and all these things. I mean, the sky is the limit. I mean, you could really bring stage rally to TVs like never before. I haven't seen anybody do it yet. I mean, the ARX and GRC was cool, but stadium rally, it's easy. You just have your 3 cameras and you show the whatever. But I mean, if you talk about putting live stream cameras on corners and in cockpits and in helmets and all these things, I mean, you could really make a really fun product that people would love to just sit down and watch. I think that the potential is there now more than it ever has been. So it's almost like there's this powder keg that's just just with this long fuse that's just burning and burning and burning. And I feel like it's getting close enough where almost any day now this could be a big thing.
Right. I mean, have you seen some of the drone footage they've been pulling out of WRC?
It's amazing.
The high speed stuff. They're 100 mile an hour car follows.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And from the soccer side, if you think about it, most of the people who do rally in the U.S. are not pro drivers. They have day jobs, they have families, they have lots going on. So think about the journey that it's going to take for them to show up to a single race. That is, without a doubt, an interesting story that people want to hear and see. Mm-hmm. You got to get on.
Yeah,
we hear the story.
I would love that.
They're great stories.
Yeah. There was at that one of those rallies I covered. So Dave Coleman, he's a engineer at Mazda, product engineer. And I'd known this guy for a long time because he comes from an editorial background too. He's a terrific writer, this guy. And I saw him at this rally, just in his personal rally car, which I don't remember what it was that he was driving. Probably a Subaru or something, just because it's easy and it's well equipped for it. But he went to this rally and he was all into it and had his co-driver and he was doing everything legitimate like any good driver should, but he just wasn't talking about it, and it's not like he was out there with cameras and this was part of his thing and whatever. He was just doing it because he likes to do it, and you see everybody that's out there and they have a similar story. Like this guy's, an accountant, this guy's a these guys are, whatever, any kind of profession you could think of. And they're just out there doing it because they love to do it. And that's the only reason, and it's really kind of cool to see that.
Yeah. And if you think about the amount of work it takes to prep a car, even once it's even built, just prepping between races, that is a commitment and a half that most people can't even wrap their head around.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're always going to break it.
It's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah. Crazy.
All right. So coming out of this call, you're going to lead that charge and get everyone to hear about Rally, and we'll just be over here running our series. It's going to be amazing. Okay.
Sounds good. No, I think honestly though, the Red Bull marketing groups and people like that these days would definitely find a great deal of success in covering these kind of things.
Yes.
I mean, it's happening a little bit in hill climb, but it's just not quite as big as it needs to be. And from there, I don't know, some of the best, like you said, Keto, some of the best imagery, best scenery I've ever seen has been at these stage rallies. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're out in the middle of nowhere and it's gorgeous as it is. And then you have these cars flying down these dirt and gravel roads at speeds no sane person would drive at, and it's just the dynamic is indescribable, really. So there's a lot of excitement there.
You just summed it up right there. Indescribable. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us today. Please tell everyone
My
there
pleasure.
where they can find you online.
Okay, so I'm just at Luke Munnell all around the web on all the social platforms, 2 N's, 2 L's. And then my website is just lukemunnell.com. I'm in the process of updating that now, so it's halfway updated. And I think hopefully by the time all these restrictions lift and we get back to work, it'll finally be done. This has been my 4-year project that I've been doing in the last 2 weeks. So I'm excited about that. But that's basically it. Just find me anywhere on social media and check out the website, and that'd be great.
Love it. I can personally attest that your Instagram feed is amazing. So
thank you.
As pictures.
That's what I'm talking about, the pictures.
Yeah, I try to keep it to that.
I thought you were talking about the quality of the feed. I was talking about the quality of the pictures.
Either way.
There are some random cat videos and things in the stories on Instagram, but as far as the actual page, I try to keep it all photos.
Love it. Well, thank you again.
Yeah,
always
thanks.
good to see you and hear from you.
Likewise, guys. Thanks for having me. It's great. We'll have to catch up very soon as we can.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.